Hello, people. Welcome. Happy Friday. Welcome to another episode of CoachesCorner.health. I am one of your co-hosts, Leslie Gaudette, mindset and emotional awareness coach for women who are on a mission to change the world. And I show them that they can actually keep doing what they love. They don't have to choose because they can adopt a both and mindset. And I show them how they can do that. And so that's what I do. Andy, over to you.
Hello, I'm Andy Lidstone, and I'm also a co-host. Neat that. I help people with getting their lives straight, getting their lives under control, sometimes with relationships, sometimes with careers, men and women. I don't have a focus as to who I help specifically as far as age group or sex, but I do have a specific set of problems that I help with. I typically focus on boundaries. I typically focus on helping people connect through boundaries. People come to me when they're having a tough time setting boundaries and when they're having a tough time keeping their important relationships and setting boundaries at the same time. So that's why they come to me, and that's what I do, and it's a lot of fun, much like your job is.
And I love how you say that it's fun, because those are pretty serious things, right?
Yeah, they are.
But you can, if you can bring a little lightness to it and allow showing people that, you know, there is a possible outcome that is exactly, or maybe not exactly what they were expecting. It could be even better,
Right.
you know, helping them move through that. So I love that.
Yeah, it's wonderful stuff. It's wonderful stuff. And we have a topic for us today. I'm excited about this. Excuse me. I'm excited about this one.
Yeah. I think it's just it's kind of cool that we've been going through this series, you know, starting with our young people, because I think we've both talked about this, how important the younger generation is to us. But I think it's really something that we should really, as a generation anyways, always be looking to those behind us that are coming up behind us, because you know, they're the ones that are going to take over the reins. And, you know, we only have one planet, right? We only have one planet. We have one life to live, but we only have one planet. And I think it's really important that we impart anything that we've learned to the younger generation to navigate this world, especially as new things get introduced, which means that can flip everything upside down and how they navigate the world through technology. I mean, with all of the newness of that, and maybe even how to navigate this world better, even in a virtual reality, because that's kind of like where we are living most of our time is online.
Yeah, and it's interesting because there's all kinds of thoughts as to whether or not that's a good thing, and it's I think it's part of the conversation. It's part of what we're talking about today. What we're talking about today is, should I be myself? Should I be a part of the group? Basically, the phrase that we're trying to talk about is, you can be anything you want to be. Now, that sounds like great advice. And in most cases, it is great advice.
Mm-hmm.
Telling our youth you can be anything you want to be, I can only think of two scenarios where it's good rather than great, where it's not quite the best advice, but it's still pretty good advice. One scenario is when the youth doesn't have a clue what they want to be. And we've talked about this before. Oftentimes we put a lot of pressure on our teenagers to know who they're going to be when they grow up. And, you know, my experience is a percentage of them do, a small percentage of them do, but not the majority by any stretch. Some of them have some ideas of something they might want to try, but this life commitment of a career, that's overwhelming and scary for a lot of teenagers, a lot of youth.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one scenario where this advice might be less than great, still good, but less than great. Another one is when they're trying to decide if they want to follow their friends and do what their friends do, and go to the colleges their friends are going to and choose the careers their friends are choosing, or whether they want to do something that's different. and sacrifice all of those friendships that at this point in their life mean everything to them. Teenagers, one of the things they struggle with the most is social connection. What does that mean? What do I have to do to have it? Why do I want it? Do I want it? All of those questions are around social connection. So this, when we tell them you can be anything you want to be, it's basically ignoring and brushing off their main priority, which is to be connected socially, right? And it can confuse a kid. It can confuse a child or a teenager. Yeah, of course they can be anything they want to be, but what happens if I want to be friends? Can I be that too? Right? And that's the part that kind of advice doesn't really address directly. Again, it's good advice, just not great advice in that scenario.
Yeah, I think, well, one of the things you talked when you were saying, especially if they want to go to the same schools as their friends, or they want to be a part of a friend group, they're all also, especially if they feel socially awkward.
Yeah.
Do I fit in? Am I even good enough to be part of this crowd? You always see those stories that they would show, movies where there was that awkward teen that wanted to be part of like the cool group. Right. And what really does make a cool group, really, because it's just someone's perspective on what cool is. Because personally, a group of, as they would say, because, for the sake of labels, nerds could think they're cool.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So who's to say what cool is? But the other part I think I want to add on to about where I think, when you say you can be anything that you want to be, or you can do whatever you want to do, I think one of the things that's missing from that particular equation is, let me help you see what that looks like. Because I think when you leave it up to someone, especially a young mind who's not even really done a lot, they're trying to figure out what it is they want to do, or what it is, how they want to live their life. If they don't have anything like experience around, how are they going to know if that's really what they want to do? Right. As point in case, I'll give you an example. When I was 18 years old, well, just about, I was actually 18 because it was a few months left before I graduated from high school. And I was thinking, okay, I'd been thinking about it. What do I want to do? What do I want to do? Now, of course, I knew that college, I kind of just figured that it was out of the equation for me. And that was just because I came from a background where the mindset was, my mom had already said it, when you graduate, you're going to get a job and you're going to help support the family. Right. So I already knew right then and there I wasn't going to college. I wasn't being encouraged. I wasn't being discouraged. She wasn't saying like, hey, I don't believe in you. But it was like, I need your help to help with the family. Right. So I said, okay. So I'm thinking, well, what am I going to do? What do I want to be? What would that even look like? And so I was looking at two opposite spectrums. And I think part of it I came back to doing kind of in that arena, but it was either be, it's so funny, I picked the two that I'm doing right now. One was, I kid you not, so one was being a legal assistant, which then turned into being a paralegal all these years later. And then the other was to be a psychologist. Well, now I'm a life coach. I'm not a psychologist or a therapist, but I do work with women around mindset, emotional awareness, and of course, self-love. So I kind of took those two ideas from at 18 years old and brought them full circle back to where I'm at now. I didn't really have anyone to say to me like, oh, okay, well, let's look at both of those. The only feedback I did get at the time was my mom had a really good friend who was a legal assistant, and she said, no, you do not want to do that. And for me, and of course, I think for most young people, when someone tells you shouldn't do something, you're like going to be looking at it like, well, why? And if they can't give you a good enough reason, then you're going to do it yourself. Now, it doesn't mean that they're not right. It just means that you're not convinced enough by their explanation.
Right. I think the key in what you said is good enough reason.
Yeah. And
if they don't give you enough information. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's why I was saying, like, I think when someone says to you, you can be whatever you want or do whatever you want, it's not just about seeing that, because again, there's that confusion. Like, I don't know what I want because I've not experienced life like you have yet. So that is like, I think, means for a further conversation. Like, okay, well, have you any ideas? What does that look like? Let's look at the bigger picture of what that could possibly look like for you.
Right.
I think that is where there's a little bit of a breakdown, at least in my own opinion, of my own experience and how I finally figured it out. And I came back to those two things together, but it was just interesting.
It was a roundabout journey.
Back on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And see, I was one of those that had not a clue what I wanted to do when I was a teenager. I mean, not the foggiest. I mean, I knew a couple of things that I was good at, but I didn't have any idea if that's what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. Like, I was good with computers. I was good with programming. I was good with, figuring out the algorithms of things, although that wasn't even a word back then. I was good at figuring out the way things worked, like the way mechanical and electronic things worked, the things that weren't people and therefore were predictable in some fashion. I was good at figuring out even the complicated ones that were harder to figure out. I was still pretty good at that. So that's what I wanted to do. And therefore, when I eventually finished high school, my high school years were a big jumble, and it took a whole lot of stuff to go through to get through that. When I eventually finished high school, and then a couple of years later, after some more stuff happened, I eventually went to college. I went to college for computer programming because that's what I was good at. It's not necessarily, I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do. I just knew that that's what I was good at. So I took it, and it turned out I hated it, right? I hated the concepts. I hated the work involved. I didn't like that I couldn't just put some cool ideas together and people would love me for it. That's not what happened. So, it turned out that I just hated it. And I think that's where people kept telling me through my teenage and early adult years, you can do anything you want. Well, this is what I was doing. And I thought this is what I wanted to do, but how do I know? Like, how do we help a person figure it out? And what I ended up doing is, because when I was growing up, computer programming was the very nerdy thing to do back in the 80s, when being a nerd was actually a bad thing. It hasn't been since then, but it has been now, or it was then. Now the nerds are the cool kids.
Yeah, and they're making a lot of money too, by the way.
Right, exactly. And I wanted on that train. But back in the day, when I decided to do this, I had to do so and choose, was I going to do what my friends were doing and go get a job in the trades, or, work in, restaurants, or follow the circus around, or do something that like teenagers do, that young adults do, and, enjoy my life for a while? Or was I going to go get serious and find a career in something that I thought I could do? Because none of my friends were doing what I was trying to do. Mm-hmm. And so when I got that advice, it was, you can be anything you want to be. Yeah, as long as I leave everybody behind that I know, my family, my friends, everybody. So to me, you can be anything you want to be meant, yeah, ignore what your friends and peers are saying. Ignore what all the people around you are saying and what they're telling you to do, because they're not right. They don't know you. They don't know what you want. Well, neither do I. So I need some help, right? So for me, and for a lot of other kids that I've known throughout the years, you can be anything you want is code for stop listening to your peers. And when and it's not what everybody means when they say that. It's not what most people mean when they say that. It is what some people mean when they say that, and it's what a lot of the youth hear when that's told to them. Mm-hmm. And that what that does is it ends up leaving them alone. It ends up causing them to choose themselves over everybody else, and they lose the opportunity to learn how to work on a team, how to be a member of a team, how to work together with other people, how to create things through collaboration. which took me until now to figure out how to do. Like it's been the last few years, much like you with the psychologist thing. You eventually got into life coach years later. I eventually figured out how to collaborate years later, decades later. Right?
Mhm.
It was the same concept. So, that advice is great, but like you said, it needs a conversation. One of the things that we've debunked a number of common phrases on this channel before, and one of the reasons why is because I think we use them because they sound like great advice, but without the context, they're not very useful.
Mhm.
Right? Without the additional conversation, without saying, okay, why can I do whatever I want, and what does what I want to do look like, and can you give me enough information, and if you can't, what should I do? Right? Like your paralegal friend, or your legal assistant friend, she said, no, don't do that. Well, why? Like, what's it about? And although she might have given you some reasons, bosses are sleazy, or it's too much work, or whatever the reason, but those whatever she gave you wasn't anything that meant something to you, or meant enough. Like, it wasn't, oh, the pay is bad, or you're going to work 70 hours and not get paid for it, or like, it wasn't things that you could understand at the time.
Correct.
And that's what we're missing when people say you can be anything you want to be. And what does that mean? Like, what actually does that mean? Do you have any clue what I can be? Because I don't. Or maybe I do, but do you think I could be any good at it? Usually that advice is given when the person who we're talking to doesn't have a good answer.
Yeah, or even if they do have an answer, they're not really fully grasping that if you're going to give someone an answer to a question around you can be what you want to be or do what you want to do, they have to be able to have some kind of either emotional a tie to it, or an experience, something that you can tie back an experience that they've had. Because again, we're talking to young minds, so that means they haven't had that life experience yet. So someone telling me, my mom's friend, saying you do not want to be a legal assistant or a legal secretary, back in the day is what they called it. And it was like, well, why not? And the answer, and I don't even remember honestly what the answer was, but I knew that it wasn't enough for me to have that emotional connection to it that would stop me from actually seeking it out. So I just went forward. Now, it did stop me initially in the beginning, because I'm thinking, okay, well, someone I know is saying don't do this. So I went out and did find other administrative jobs, but I ended up finding my way back to being in front of a lawyer and walking in boldly to his office and saying, your phones ring a lot, because I was the switchboard person. Your phones ring a lot. Looks like you're busy. Could you use some help? Like, that was how I actually approached my first job, to work for a lawyer. And that was bold. I look back at that person, I'm thinking, who were you? But, that's exactly what I did. I walked into the office, as you would say, like, I don't even know if I should bring that up, but, I was being the Donna, right?
Yes.
Suits and,
Yeah. I like that.
I was being her, and I just walked right in and I said, hey, you look busy. Your phones are ringing. Do you need help? He hired me. 2 weeks later, after I gave notice to the company, they found someone else to replace me, and I went to work for him. And the first 7 years of my life of being in the legal field was working for a real estate attorney. Now, I still, even a roundabout way, found my way there, and I had experiences, some throughout the last almost 40 years, good, most of them good, some of them not so good. But again, I didn't really have that conversation fleshed out enough to say, well, this is the reason why I'm saying for you not to do this, because this is my experience. Would that have been enough for me to say to myself, well, if I can't do that, then I need help figuring out what would be a good fit, because you can't tell someone not to do something when you're not giving them
when they don't have a better option
of another option. So when someone says to you as a young person, you can do whatever you want or be whoever you want to be, and you say, well, I don't even really know what that is, or some you say, well, I think I want to be a musician, or I want to be an artist, or I want to be a scientist, or I want to be an IT person, or whatever that is, and the person you're talking to says, oh, you don't want to do that, and you don't have a second option, my advice would be to push back and say, well, if you're saying not to do that, I need to have like, let's talk about this more. And what would you suggest? Because let's have a
Right.
conversation. You can't just cut me off at the knees and that's it, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of like, I think it's really good that we're having these conversations, I believe, because first of all, number one, self-development is so mainstream now. So people are starting to talk more. People are online, so they're more connected. We can be more connected. We're not like disconnected and only in communities of people where
Yeah.
everybody knows everybody in your town or
Yeah.
in your church or in your whatever type of group
Right.
you're in. Now
Right.
you can be online and know millions, you can know thousands of people around the globe
Yeah.
and be connected that way. So I'm
Yeah.
so glad that self-development is this big. And now
Yeah.
like, we can do that on our channel. We can bring
Yeah.
awareness to this.
Yeah. Well, and that's exactly it. I like some of the things that you said, especially the parts around. Well, I actually liked all of what you said, but especially the parts around. You know, what if you want to be a musician or a scientist, or and and the person you're talking to says, well, no, you shouldn't do that because you're not going to make any money doing that. You're not going to get anywhere doing that. And the default response usually is, well, yeah, that's not a good career for you. You can't, settle down and have a family and do the things that I think you want to do, that you will want to do if you're just, doing those things. But how do you know? Like, do you know that kid? Do you know what their dreams are? Maybe that is their dream. Maybe they don't have another dream. And even if they do have other dreams, do you know enough about what motivates them? Like we were saying, this is the conversation. And sometimes, and this is the part I wanted to bring up, sometimes you can be anything you want to be is in response to a child saying, I want to be a musician, or I want to be a babysitter for the rest of my life, or, I want to be something, that a lot of adults would say, you can't make a career out of that. But a teenager or a youth might say something like that, and they'll run into somebody that says, yeah, you can do that. You can be anything you want to be. That, again, is good advice, as long as it comes with a conversation.
Yeah. Because you need to be able to show them that, yeah, that's a great, you can do it, whatever you want to do. But if that is your career of choice, let's look at it further, what it's going to possibly look like for you. Because again, you don't know. Like you could go through life. You could decide that that's what you want to be a musician. Or in the case of, I brought this up when we first started talking on this channel about a friend of mine who was an attorney who went to law school, and law school isn't cheap. It's an extremely expensive venture. And she only practiced 1 year and decided it wasn't for her. And I was like blown away by that. Number one, because she was just so matter of fact and had made the decision not to practice law in that setting. But two, that it was just so easy for her to just decide after spending all that money, that's not what she wanted to do. Now, I still to this day do not know if she took what she learned in law school and used it for something else. Right. But still, again, it's having those conversations because, if I had said I wanted to be a lawyer and someone was a lawyer in my life and said, well, yeah, you can do that. And let me tell you the journey of what it means, what the journey is to get to be a lawyer and what you're going to have to go through and what you're going to experience or what you could possibly experience. And that can then say, oh, maybe I don't want to be a lawyer, right? Or a musician.
Or maybe that excites me. Maybe those are the things that I want. Or, you can make the choice.
Yeah. Or if someone wanted to be a musician or a dancer or whatever that looks like. And it's like, okay, well, let's talk about it. And this is a possibility. It could happen great for you. But there is a high percentage of people who don't really make a huge successful career out of it. They make a decent living. But if you're looking for fame, that might not happen. So having these conversations, I think, is really important. Like flesh it out more.
That's and not just about the percentage of people who succeed, because that's kind of a skewed number too. because
Yes.
the people who don't succeed are the people who never had this conversation as a kid.
Yeah.
Who never had somebody sit them down and have this conversation. By having this conversation, you're subtly increasing their odds of success by exponential amounts.
Mm-hmm.
By sitting down and saying, what does it look like to be a musician? What does it look like to be a dancer? What does it look like to be a scientist? What do you got to do? What are you probably going to end up doing? What's likely going to happen? And by the very act of having that conversation, suddenly they're above 80% of the other people who didn't get this conversation when they went into that career. So, that's the point. You can be anything you want to be as great advice, but don't leave it at that. And if you can't go further, don't give the advice.
Mm-hmm.
And for the youth watching this right now, if somebody gives you that advice, don't let them off the hook.
Yes.
Ask for the explanation, ask for the why, ask for more. And if you don't want to know, don't ask that person, ask somebody else. Or if you don't want to know from them, don't ask that person, ask somebody else. Or if B, you don't trust them, again, ask somebody else. If you think they're just brushing you off, then let them brush you off and go somewhere else. Don't take the advice to heart unless you think they mean it and are willing to back it up. Because it is good advice in the right scenario with the right conversation going with it in the right context. It's a great thing to say. It's not enough all by itself. Yeah. So if somebody says that to you, follow up.
Yeah, because you have a right to know. I mean, if someone can't just say to you, like, don't do this, it's like, I mean, I don't know if I could use jumping off the bridge analogy, but when you get someone asks you, oh, so-and-so jumped off the bridge, would you follow them? Well, probably not, right? Unless they were saying, if you followed it up with if your friend jumped off the bridge, in other words, they took the leap of faith and they decided to go all in doing this one thing, but at the end of the rainbow, they failed at their endeavor. Would you follow after them, right? And so it's like the question is really not necessarily a no answer. It could be, well, I might, because I might figure out a different way that would actually lead to success, right? So, but the one thing I wanted to talk about, because I saw it when you wrote it into the description, and this really, really makes me, and you brought it up earlier, it really makes me want to think about when we are told to not listen to our peers. And yet, all these years later, you will hear, if you're on social media, if you're watching people talk about something that I and Andy both believe in, is having a circle of people in your life that you know, like, and trust, that have your back. Why can it not be your peers that you have now, right? Because they could be, when you create those deeper bonds with the people in your life right now who know you, that are going through life at the same time as you, the same experiences. I don't understand why it's a bad thing, especially if you have an idea, that person, you're talking it out with your peers. Now, of course, if your peers are saying to you, they're laughing at you, or they're ridiculing or judging or criticizing you, that's one thing. Obviously, then you have to take a closer look at that person. But if you have a friend group who really is saying, you know, man, I wish that I could do this. This is what I want to do for my life. This is what I'm thinking it's going to look like. And the rest of you are like chiming in, yeah, that sounds really cool. And then you start talking about it further. I don't see anything wrong with you having peers in your life that can encourage you. Yes. I would never sway. I don't think I would want to sway my kids, if I had any, to not have those connections to learn about how to have choices and make decisions. It's a part of growing up.
Yeah. Not only is it a part of growing up, it's probably the most important part of growing up, because as I mentioned before, it's the thing that youth and teens are struggling with the most, is how do I fit in with a certain group of people? How do I find the people I fit in with? What does social look like? Like, what does being around people look like? What do I want that to look like? And there's a whole bunch of decisions, and there's a whole bunch of changing of minds, and there's a whole bunch of stuff going on. And So when we say you can be anything you want to be, that often says don't listen to the people that are telling you what to do. And then you're telling them what to do. So you're saying don't listen to your own advice is what it sounds like. And like you said, sometimes it's those peers, those friends, those people that we grew up with. And I want to put a distinction between peers and friends, because peers are people who are similar to us, who are going through what we're going through. We don't necessarily like them. They don't necessarily like us. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. But peers are simply people in a similar situation. Friends, however, are people in a similar situation that we want to be around. And those ones are important. Like, you may change your mind about which ones you want to be around. And you're valid to do so. That's what living life is about. We change our minds. We decide. We make decisions. We grow and change as we go, and that's supposed to happen. But for somebody to tell you that you should do that is not useful, not helpful. I agree. I think it's in many cases as useful or more useful to talk about these things with my group of friends than it is with adults. Right? Adults might have the experiences, but they don't know what I want. Right? Whereas my friends might not have the experience, but they know what I want. So there's value on both sides of that conversation. And I think it's important that we do have both conversations. Now, if we happen to have a few people who can sit down together, like if I can sit down with my friends and a couple of adults, and my friends know what I want and can help me get that point out, and the adults have had a variety of experience and can help me hear what that's about, and then I have my friends who know what I want helping me hear that experience, and it's all kind of filtering through, and it's like a committee trying to help me through this. Brilliant. But very few people have that opportunity. Right. And that's why I think these phrases, these just, one-liners that we throw out, they're great as long as they're accompanied by the context. Otherwise, they're simply good and sometimes harmful.
Yeah. Oh, I have to bring something to your attention because it just popped into my head based on a reel, believe it or not, that I saw on Facebook. And it was a Dr. Phil episode, just a snippet of a young girl and her mom. And they were talking about this young girl. She approached her mom and said, Mom, I can't live on $1,000 a month. And, not with the lifestyle that I have become accustomed to. And so he brought up the whole thing that sounds like you need a job. And she started to cry because, again, that could be that you can be whatever you want. You can live however the lifestyle that you want. But if you're within a dynamic where you haven't had that conversation, what does life look like outside of this bubble that you're living in where everything is taken care of? And now you go out into the world and you're going to have to do it on your own. I'm just curious your thoughts on that, because I thought, oh my gosh, that kind of just goes with this conversation of you can be whatever you want, right?
You just got to earn it. But what does earn it look like? What does that even look like? How do I know what all the rules are? How do I know how to even do that? A lot of youth get that advice and end up working at McDonald's until they're 35 because they don't know how to live on their own. They don't know how to go and get and make their dreams happen. They don't know what it's like to go and live life. And when they were youth and had the opportunity to find some people to surround themselves with to help them do that, they were given the advice to do what they want, and they lost that. And they, instead of pursuing their social groups or their peers or going to the same school as their girlfriend or whatever that was, they chose to go their own path without any guidance. And, that's hard. It's not an easy way to succeed that way. There are people who do it. It is possible for sure. but easy or common, not at all.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're, that's the point is, yeah, you can be anything you want, but are you going to help me? Am I going to help you get there? Are you going to help me get there? That's great advice, but do you understand the context?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And this is again to the youth. If you don't understand the context of what they're saying, completely ignore it. It's useless. However, if you're able to get some context, if you're able to ask some questions and get some questions asked and say, okay, what does it look like? If I want to be a musician, how am I going to put food on my table for the next 10 years? For the next 2 years? Maybe I'll be a musician who tunes guitars for other kids. Maybe I'll be a musician who goes and works in a music store and sells guitars or sells trombones or whatever the thing is. Or maybe I'll be a musician who just happens to find a band when I'm 16 and we sell a few records. Or maybe I'll be a musician who moves to New York and sings on Broadway. Right? Maybe there's 1,000 ways to do that, but what does it look like? What does it actually look like?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's not about, you can do whatever you want. Sure, great. That's absolutely useless. What does it mean? What does doing what I want look like? The practical sense of it. And not the other common thing is you can't make a living at doing that. Nobody ever succeeds doing that, or the rates of success are very rare. Only 1 in a million people who try to become an actor ever get famous. Yeah, that's true. But that's also useless advice.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you're telling this person, this child, this youth, that they should give up on their dreams, the things that they want most in life they don't get to have? Do you know how much of an impact that has on the rest of their lives, the next 60, 70, 80 years of their lives? Don't. Right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're that youth, don't take that advice. Unless they can help you figure it out, their advice isn't very useful.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if it's your parents, then maybe they can't give you the help right now, but you can observe. You can watch. You can talk to the people around them. If it's people that that, your uncle or your grandmother or whatever, you can observe their life and see how that has turned out for them and what's actually affected them. Maybe they don't have the answers for you right now, but you can watch. You can see. And that's enough sometimes. Yeah. And maybe the problems they went through, you won't go through, or maybe you will go through, but you can see what to look out for. Right? That's my thoughts on the subject. Be practical.
I think too is teaching them to actually become more curious about that question. And if they have ideas, not to just put all your eggs in one basket. I think to actually look around, look at what you're good at, what you like to do, the things that you like to do could, and again, end up in a completely different thing. Like, as I said, as myself as an example that I used in the beginning, I wanted to be either a psychologist or a legal secretary. Completely different, way off from each other, being related to any way other than it meant serving people in some way. That was their common connection. And of course, it came back full circle in a sense where I'm still serving lawyers and paralegals in the position that I do have now, as well as being a life coach, which is still serving in a similar capacity, except it's not a psychologist or a therapist, which is licensed. And so that's really the difference. But I brought those two things that just happened to be of interest to me, brought them full circle here. But it would have really been nice to have someone back then to talk with them about my choices and what that could look like. And I think, as I said, I'm really happy now because it's such a mainstream thing where people talk about, self-development and doing better and helping our
Yeah.
kids. Our kids are like the future generations are important. And I think part of that not only is you can be whatever you want to be, I think that also should be, you can be whatever part of whatever friend group that you want to be in as well, and not
Yes.
feel like, oh, well, they're beneath me because they're poor, or they're beneath me because I don't like rich people, or they're beneath me because they're not cool because I think they're not cool, but I feel like I am. I want to be part of a cool crowd. Or
Or
they're not
they're better than
soft,
me, or they're
or they're
better
better
than
than
me
me.
for all kinds of those same
Yeah.
reasons.
And so it's like, not only is it, you can be whatever you want to be, but you can do that by being part of your friend group and still be who you are and learn about yourself, because through interactions with your connections with other people, you're going to learn what you like and what you don't like. You're going to learn
Right.
what kind of people you want to be around. You're going to get ideas from other people that you might not have even thought about, that maybe your parents were saying, I really want you to go to law school because maybe dad wants you to follow in his footsteps, or mom wants you to follow in her footsteps. And you're like,
Right.
yeah, no. And then someone starts talking to you in your friend group. Yeah, my dad, da 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 da, or my mom, da 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 da, is a lawyer or a judge or whatever, or a doctor. And this is and they tell me all this cool stuff. And then all of a sudden that sparks your imagination. You're thinking, I'm going to go back to mom and dad and talk to them again about this particular
Right.
field of, and that can spark. So not distancing them from themselves, let them be themselves. They're kids only once, they're young people only, like young adults only once.
Right.
And the only way for them to feel it out is to support them, allow them to feel it out with their friend groups, and also support them in conversations around next steps to life.
Yeah.
That's what I think is part of the whole journey of living, is
Yeah.
having conversations and learning what you like and
Yes.
which direction you want to go.
Exactly. And that's exactly it. It's about having those conversations. It's about being able to find people to have those conversations with. And a lot of the time it is the people that you hang out with. It is, a lot of the times it is your friends, or the family that you hang out with, or it is about those people that you're around. They can answer some of those questions. And even if they can't answer the questions, one of the things that friends are great for is helping you investigate the answers. Right? If you don't know the answers and you don't have an uncle who was a lawyer, maybe they do. Or if they don't have the answers and they've never traveled with a band, maybe they have a second cousin twice removed who was in a band once and knows somebody who knows somebody. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's about sharing those experiences. It's about having the conversations and being able to dream and letting your dreams live, letting your dreams grow and change and evolve and gain life. Yes, you can be anything you want to be. That is completely true. And it is great advice given with context. Yes, you can be anything you want to be, and this thing you want to be, this is how I think you could do it. And here's somebody else who might give you a different perspective. Oh, and let's go to the library and look at some stuff up, or let's go search it on the internet, because that's what people do now. These young people, anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just let's figure it out. Let's look. Whether I know or not, let's take a look. What does it look like?
Yeah.
Right?
And I think it starts, even like we've talked about this, it starts way sooner than you're in your teen years, where you are encouraged to dream and to look outside of like all of the possibilities. And so you might have like 1,000, well, I wouldn't say 1,000, but maybe you might have 10 things on your list. Like, oh, I want to be a fireman, a police officer. I want to be a doctor, a lawyer. You might play doctor at home. Get mom and dad to buy you a lab coat, and you're a scientist at home. All of these things, you are, in a sense, you're looking for what interests you. And
Yes.
that's the place where it starts. And that's where your parents start saying, oh, you can be whatever you want. You can do whatever you want. I think what ends up happening is it becomes real when they start going to that, coming to that place where high school's almost over, the decision to go to college or university is now upon them, and that's when it becomes a real decision. Because before,
Right.
you can dream about all these things. I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to be this, I want to be that. But now it becomes, okay, now I have to decide, because it's no longer just thinking about it or dreaming about it or just talking about it. It's actually making a decision. And
Right.
honestly, if I had kids, one of the things I think I would love to be able to encourage them to do is, if you need time to go and do something else where you go out and you experience life, then do that, because that will give you context in a way,
Right.
because you're experiencing life and you
Yeah.
get to see what's out there. And maybe
Yeah.
you do take a year off from going to college or university. I think that's a great idea, as
Yeah.
long as it's not just to kind of float around and I'm not like supporting you in a
Right.
way where I'm supporting you emotionally and, intellectually talking to you about it. Because as you experience life, I want you to be able to talk. If I was a parent, I want my child to talk to me and say, hey, this is what I'm experiencing. These are the things, the life experiences that are coming to me. I'm not sure yet still what I want to do for my life, and that's okay.
Right.
So, but you're still guiding them. And then maybe all of a sudden they have that light bulb moment. And it's like, this is what I want to do. Now I'm going to go to college because now I have clarity, if that's what they choose. Or a lot of people didn't go to college that are successful. That's the
Yeah.
one thing. I know that college, yes, they say that a lot of people still believe that having a college degree or a university degree is still beneficial to have on your resume when you're going out to look for a job. But honestly, my own personal opinion, if I had a business and I'm hiring someone, unless it's like specifically a trade that they have to know how to do,
Right.
I believe that you can teach people as long as they have
Yeah.
they're teachable.
Yeah. Yeah. There are certain jobs you need qualifications. If you want to be a lawyer, you have to have taken law school, right? Like, you want to be a doctor, you have to pass medical school.
Mm-hmm.
There are certain things that are legally bound to an education, but there are a lot fewer than you think.
Mm-hmm.
And again, if a kid says, I want to be a YouTuber, then go be a YouTuber. Like, figure out how to make YouTube videos and figure out how to get an audience and figure out how to, help them figure that stuff out. I actually had a client recently that said, my kid wants to be a YouTuber and doesn't want to be anything else. I'm like, he's 10. He's probably not going to want to do that when he's 18. And if he does, by then he'll have figured it out, because he'll have surrounded himself with people who want him to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And if he hasn't, then you be that person. Right? And that's the point, is be anything you want to be is great. Help them do that. Especially if you're a parent or an authority figure, school counselor, something like that. If you're somebody who has the power to help that child learn what it means, and I don't just mean hand them a few pamphlets. I mean, actually go out in the world with them and learn what it means. Right? What it means to do this thing they want to do. Figure it out. Because I promise you, the other 100 kids you've helped figure out their jobs haven't done the same thing this kid wants to do, even if they've all wanted the same job. They're all looking at it differently. And yes, almost every boy wants to be a YouTuber these days.
Love it. Well, there's a lot of young people out there that have huge followings, and I'm talking about under 10. Then that's the only reason why I know that is because I've seen some. I was babysitting for someone, and her son was watching this YouTuber show how to play games, and he was 10 years. I think he was 10 years old.
Yeah.
Now this
Yeah,
was
there's lots of adults doing that too, but there's kids.
There's a lot of adults. Exactly. I think it's just, when you encourage your kids to actually go out and do some of these things, it doesn't mean that's what they're going to do for the rest of their lives, but
Exactly.
it could spark the next idea, the next world changing idea. And they go out and they do that.
Get them doing something, because how they figure out what they want is by doing something.
Yeah.
right? And help them to do whatever that thing is, even if it's something you think is dumb or not going to be able to help them. Help them do it. And if you can help them do it when they're 10 or 12 or better yet, when they're 15, if you can help them do that then they'll have pivoted and changed their mind into something a little more able to, something that they're able to capitalize on a little easier by the time they move up, by the time they're 18, by the time they decide they want college or not, by the time they decide they want to go traveling the world for a year or work in a job for a year, or by the time they just make some of those life decisions, they'll have had some life experience because you've helped them do some of these things when they're 14, 15, 16 years old.
Yeah. But the one thing I do want to point out is when you are in these conversations with young people, with your kids, with maybe your nieces and nephews, with your grandchildren, whatever that looks like, is don't try to fix it for them.
Right.
Have the conversation to ask them questions, help them find the questions to ask to find the answers, help them find the answers that work for them, not what you think they should do, but rather what feels right to them. Because I know there's quite a few people who've had had these conversations that have really left a little bit of scarring for them as they've gotten older, to like my generation, where they're thinking that, oh, when my parents stepped in, all that made me feel was that I wasn't good enough.
Right.
When my parents stepped in and said, no, do it this way, this is better, that made me feel like what I did wasn't good enough. And what they were really, when they understand now, what they were really doing was to say, hey, I wanted to show you a better way. What do you think? But it didn't come across that way. It came across, do it this way because it's much better than what you were doing. And I think when you come from a fixing it frame of mind, it makes your kids feel like they're not good enough. So
that's right.
I know it's a lot to maybe change how maybe what you experience to now start like looking at how you interact with young people. But when you do this, imagine the ripple effect, because you're helping this next generation, who is then going to be more empowered to help the next generation, who's going to be then more empowered to help the next generation. It doesn't mean that the same issues aren't going to be there, but it just means that they're going to be better equipped to figure it out faster.
Yeah. And that's the goal here. We're not trying to fix the world in one generation or in 1 hour. We're trying to help people become better at who they are so we can help other people become better at who they are. That's what we do.
Yep.
And I like that. It's not about helping them find the answers you want them to have. Oh, you want to be a musician? Well, here's all the musicians that suck. And here's the statistics of how many musicians never make a living, because that's not helpful. You're actively trying to discourage them. As soon as you do that, you're going to lose them. They're not going to care what you have to say anymore. Help them see what it looks like. And I'm not talking help them see that it takes 35 years of musical practice before you become any good at something. I don't care. Show them the ones who get successful when they're 16. Show them the ones who get successful when they're 21 and 25 and 30. Help them see these experiences and help them to ask which questions are most relevant to them. Oh, this person I identify with, this person I identify with. What helps to identify with that person? Like, help them be curious. Help them explore. Help them open up their curiosity, not show them the right way. Like that, I think I agree with you. That's exactly what I think the best way to help these youth through these explorations. Yes, they can literally be anything they want to be, from a YouTuber to an alien. They can be anything.
The alien part.
Well, at some point, some of us are going to go to another planet.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, things are happening already. You know, people are going into space in unconventionally doing that. You know, like, you know,
exactly.
Not the normal way of doing things. So that they did in the day. But that's okay. I think it's growth and being different and doing things differently, could be the same kind of thing, but now it's more expanded and becomes different, is a good thing. I think, like at some point years ago, I remember Orson, was it Orson? Was it Orson Welles? No. Who was it that wrote the book? The War of the Worlds. Who wrote that?
Oh, I can't remember. Maybe it was. I don't remember who it was, but yeah.
But I know that Orson Welles he had done a radio show, I believe it was him, back in the day, and made it seem like we were being invaded by aliens, and people started to panic, right? And so then you have people who wrote, so who's to say? But they were talking about going into space and aliens and all that stuff, and what I'm getting at is in the next thing, you start seeing people writing books about going to space. People, the Wright brothers were not the first to think of flight, but they were the first ones to actually make it really happen, right? But there was another unknown guy who just didn't make it happen, and they took it and they made it come to. But they were thinking about flying. Well, how do we do that? Well, that's great. They got the planes in the air, but now if you think about it, the plane that just takes off just like this and hovers. Where did they get that from, right? They learned. It was doing something that's already being done, but doing it better. Going to space, now they're doing it different, and now they're doing it better. Like when they were going in just like the rocket ships, and then they had the shuttle, and now they've got those other things that they've been doing. I mean, Elon Musk, right? He took someone, or was it the other guy, a Virgin, whatever guy? I can't remember, but I mean, there's just so much going on, right? And then you've got, like, again, cars, like Tesla and the car, like all these electric vehicles that people are now. You've got cars that hover above the ground. There's cars that you can drive underwater. Like there's a possibility of change, and when we can allow our kids to explore. I want to do this. I want to do that. I want to try this. I want to try that. And then all of a sudden, they do that. You don't try to fix it. You allow their minds to work. And then all of a sudden, they have a light bulb moment that changes the world. Like I said, everything that we already have that now kids are being born into, because you and I, not a lot of the stuff that we have today was part of our life growing up. At least I know for myself. For televisions we had black and white, and the turning. We didn't have remotes, by the way.
I was the remote.
Yeah, I wasn't. Or the, like we had, like LPs. Now people are going back to the vinyl, but before that's how our 8 tracks. Things got better along the way because somebody had a light bulb moment, because they were inspired to change, and it changed the world. The internet changed the world. So that's what we're just trying to say is, when you say to your children, you can be anything you want to be or do anything you want to do, it cannot be just a saying that you're used to, like a buzzword type saying that you are just heard and you just saying it, you're just repeating it if you don't really truly mean it, because that doesn't show that your kids that you really truly believe in them. And then they go out into the world and they don't believe in themselves. And then we have another generation of adults trying to figure out life.
Who they are.
Figure it out. Who am I and what do I want? And they're going through midlife crises because they can't figure it out. Help them do that in their younger stages, and let them be able to pay that forward to the next generation and so on. So we can start building generations of young people who are, figuring things out, maybe the same problems out, but they're doing it faster, because they're more equipped.
Yeah, I agree. Let's do more of that. Let's help our youth, our teenagers, our young adults. Let's help them figure out what they want, who they are, and get more out of life. Let's help them do that with their friends, without their friends, whichever their choices they make. Let's help them get what they're looking for, rather than follow the demands of the people who came before them. Right? Let's help them get what they're looking for. It doesn't make them snowflakes. It makes them powerhouses. Powerhouses we could never be. It makes them be able to do things we could never do. right? And that's what I want to see. That's what I want more of. And I love this conversation. It's been a lot of things thrown back and forth with you and I, and a lot of wisdom shared between the two of us. I hope you got something out of this. I hope it was useful to you, and if it was, please let us know. Drop us a comment. Like and share the video. Do all those wonderful YouTube things that YouTube likes, so that other people see these videos. And we'll look forward to seeing you on our next show.
Yeah, no, this was awesome. Probably one of my favorite conversations. Yeah,
it is a good one.
Again, because like we've said, we really, truly believe that the future of our younger generation is important, that we pay attention to, not just leave it up to them to try to figure it out. Because again, then what we're saying to them in essence is, you can do whatever you want or be whatever you want, but we're not giving them any real guidance to show them we've gone this path and let's help you figure it out, but not fix it for you, but allow you to find your path your way and just get that maybe even that course correct, or advice around well, how did you do this, or have you ever experience this, allowing them to have that real conversation and creating that deeper bond. Because that's partly what is really important to me, is having families with deeper bonds with each other, the family members being able to talk to each other and express how they feel and express what their dreams, hopes, and desires are. And especially even with their peers and their friends, the peer groups, whether they're part of groups or work, and their friends, their close allies, the people that they do life with. You want to be able to support them. So I have loved this conversation. I don't know where we're going next, but this has been fabulous, this series so far. I really, really enjoyed it. Thank you, Andy. Thank you so much.
Thank you for all the work that you do.
Oh my gosh. Well, we both together, I think this is a cool and a really good dynamic. I'm really happy, and I'm excited for what comes next. We will be going live again next Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern, as always. And then, we are, I think, 2 more weeks, and then we'll be taking a couple of weeks off. But
we got a couple of weeks off here at the end of August.
Yeah. But that's okay, because you know what? Time off is a good thing. It means that we're going to have some fun. We're going to enjoy life. We're going to see what's out there, maybe try some new things, and have new experiences, and maybe meet new people in the process. So until then, we will see you all again next Friday. Have a great rest of your Friday, a great weekend, a great week ahead, and we'll see you next week. Bye for now.
See you, everybody. Bye-bye.